The CFA Institute recently published the pass rates for the December 2020 CFA exams, and these pass rates are extremely high, higher than we've seen in a long time. The average pass rate over the last 10 years for the Level 1 exam is somewhere around 42%, and for the December 2020 Level 1 exam, the pass rate was 49%. The Level 2 and Level 3 December 2020 exams were also well above their 10-year historical pass rates, putting the numbers at well above 50%. The last time we saw pass rates this high was around 1998. So why did they get so high in the end of 2020? Well, let's talk about it. Keep in mind that this increase in pass rates was not due to the recently announced changes where CFA exams are now 25% shorter, they can be taken on computers, and they can also be taken more often throughout the year. I did share my thoughts on all those changes in this video here, but those changes don't take effect until the February 2021 exams. So there are 2 or 3 reasonable explanations for why these pass rates were so much higher than they have been in recent history. Either the minimum passing score setting was set to a much lower bar, or just the questions written were easier questions, or a combination of those two, or candidates ended up with much more time to study from the mass cancellations of the June 2020 exams, and that additional study time made a big difference in their test scores, meaning a lot more candidates were able to pass. Let's talk about that first one really quickly. The CFA Institute, in setting their minimum passing score for each exam each year, uses something called the Angoff standard setting method. This involves 100 or a few hundred charter holders getting together, going over the exam questions that were put together by many other charter holders on the test writing committee, and making a determination, each of them independently and then working together as a whole, as to how difficult those questions are, especially in relation to how difficult questions have been on CFA exams in the past. The possibility here is that the group of charter holders setting the minimum passing score determined the exam questions to be relatively more difficult, but then when candidates actually sat for the exam, they felt like, or they were able to answer enough questions, meaning that the questions were relatively easy to what they've seen earlier. I don't know that this is all that likely. It's a relatively significant size of charter holders who work to set the minimum passing score, and a lot of them do it year after year, so they're really familiar with the process and working with one another in that process. So it doesn't seem very likely to me anyway that that large group of charter holders would not have a very good feel for how difficult the questions that were coming up on the December 2020 exams were. What I see as a more likely supporting argument for that specific theory is that the people writing the questions, not the people setting the MPS, but the test writers, chose to write questions that covered what most candidates consider to be kind of like the core or the foundational topics of each LOS or each book, rather than some of the more fringe topics. For my Level 2 exam, a lot of the test writers chose to not test on those core or foundational things of each LOS, but rather more of the fringe topics. And there was a lot of outrage by many candidates at the time. You could go to check out some of those old posts if you want to, but it could be that they just decided to write about the things that probably more people were studying for and did more practice questions for, and therefore became more familiar with, so that when they got to the question on equity or corporate finance or whatever, the specific questions that were asked were things they were more comfortable taking. The other possibility is that candidates just had way more time to study this time around. If you believe that that is the reason for these higher passing scores, and from what I've seen so far, most candidates and charter holders are in this camp, then it's really a testament to the power of hours and how much spending more time studying can help a candidate's chances of passing any CFA exam. If this is the real reason for the higher passing scores, it proves that maximizing the amount of hours that you spend studying is potentially the best way to increase your test scores on these exams. I always recommend to any candidates that ask me to start studying 7 to 9 months before any of the CFA exams. It's just going to give you way more days to get in those 400 plus hours that I recommend. The counter argument that I hear from time to time is that that's a far too early period of time to start studying. It's too soon. It leaves too much time from when you started studying the first topic until you eventually get back to reviewing that first topic in your final review. If you learn something in, say, September of 2019 for an exam that you're going to take in June of 2020, you're going to have forgotten so much of that over the 9-month period that starting that early did not help you at all. I understand this argument. It makes sense. People certainly forget things easier and forget more things over a longer period of time. But if you consider that many of these December 2020 exam takers started studying in January, February, March of 2020 in anticipation of a June 2020 exam, and then factor in that they probably spent a lot of the second half of the year studying. Even many of them probably took July and August off and said, man, I still have until December until I can take this thing now. I'm not even going to worry about it for the next couple of months. That still meant that they got an additional 3 or 4 months of study time that they otherwise wouldn't have. And I think that's why you might see pass rates that are so much higher right now. So if that theory is right, It proves that even though information is forgot over longer periods of time, there's much more value to starting earlier and learning the things earlier. So if you learned a topic mostly, maybe you learn it 75% of the way, even if you forget 80% of what you learned, you still know 15% or so of that topic when you get to your final review. You're going to have a lot more time to study those topics, and you're going to have a lot more time in your final review. Maybe instead of 2 weeks, you have 6 weeks or something like that to start doing practice exams and really refreshing yourself through those practice questions in the practice exams on all the other material that you learned 6, 9, maybe 12 months ago. So the power of hours is actually a bigger factor than the forgetfulness of people's brains over anything greater than a 6-month period, and these pass rates might prove that. Now keep in mind that many of the June 2020 candidates are still yet to take an exam. Probably most of them did it in December of 2020, but I don't know if they were the vast majority. Because when the June 2020 exam was postponed, the December 2020 exam was the earliest period in which they could take that. And then in 2021, with the computer-based model and the more frequent testing, you could do like February, April, and also June of 2021. I think we're going to see many of the June 2020 test takers who had to have their exam postponed testing in these next few months here, especially considering they may have perceived the CBT model as being more favorable. So you could see more than half of those 2020 testers still yet to take an exam. Pair this with the fact that those exams are shorter and are given on computers, which are two factors that I've argued could make the thing a little bit easier. In 2021, we may end up seeing some of the highest pass rates that we've seen in like 40 or 50 years on these CFA exams. If you are watching this video and you did take the December 2020 exam, if you passed the exam, huge congratulations to you. That's a big deal. Passing the level 1 exam is the biggest step towards becoming a charter holder, in my opinion, just because that has the lowest pass rate, because there's so many people who take the level 1 exam that aren't really serious about, really serious about becoming charter holders at some point in their life. So if you pass that, you're over the big first hurdle. It's the easiest exam though, so you have a lot of work ahead of you. If you happen to fail the December 2020 exam, just know that there's an easy solution to be able to pass it next time. Spend more hours studying, do more practice questions and more practice exams, and maybe the future exams will be a little bit easier for you because of some of the things I've talked about in this video. Maybe you picked a good time to start the program and fail one. It might get a little bit better for you, even though some people say it won't be easier. I think it will be. If you've gotten to this point in the video, it means you watched the whole thing, and I very much appreciate that. The YouTube algorithm loves long watch time in terms of total minutes watched and a percentage of the video. So if you could also like this video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done those things already, those both help me out a lot too and helps the channel grow. If you want to support me personally and support the channel, you can check out my Patreon link. It's in the description on my channel. And as always, thanks for your time. Thanks for watching.